The silent protagonist has been pretty much a thing since the dawn of gaming. I'd be willing to bet that the most well-known example is Link from the Legend of Zelda series, though there are plenty more examples out there. Despite this, it seems like the silent protagonist is one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of gaming. It pains me to see just how many people are out there that miss the point of them entirely. They are not meant to be literally silent. So let me explain what is a silent protagonist. A silent protagonist doesn't talk in-game because they're supposed to be the in-game representation of the player. You are meant to play them not as a character with established, character, but as yourself. They are a blank slate that you are meant to project yourself onto. They are not people that simply don't talk and yet still manage to go through life as if they were talking. And even if they don't talk in-game according to the game's internal logic, they do. In Pokemon, for example, there is a girl that is known as the Copycat Girl, and they'll repeat whatever is said to them, which means that your character, in-universe, does talk, despite the game never really showing us this. Despite this fact, a lot of gamers take it as being literal, and a lot of people will argue that this is a bad thing for games. They equate a silent protagonist in-game to having a silent protagonist in a movie, which even then wouldn't be a bad thing if you could pull it off right. They think it means that there's nothing substantially there, when in reality, it's supposed to be you. So whatever thoughts and feelings you have is what the character thinks and feels, even if there is nothing in-game to demonstrate this. Link was named that because he represents the link between the player and the game world. That's you stabbing those monsters in the face. That's you getting wrecked by that horse monster thing. That's you that saved Zelda at the end. Having the character not speak in game allows it to do things that games with voice protagonists cannot do. For example, you can't play Kratos in God of War 2 as anything else than a very angry Spartan man that's seeking revenge on the gods. He can't be a noble or insecure warrior. He is as you see him. A is A. But on the other hand, you can play Doyle from COD 3 as any kind of character you want. You want him to be a brave soldier? You can go right ahead and do that. You want him to start off as someone excited to kill some Germans, but by the end, just completely horrified by the atrocities he and the people around him had to commit? You can do that as well. Now, I'm not saying that COD 3's story is better than God of War 2's, I'm saying it's more flexible. There are two different ways of doing things, and both of them are valid. My problem is the fact that people will compare the two as if they were both approaching the story in the same way, like they are both trying to be a movie that you passively watch, and that everything is to be taken literal in both cases. Games are an interactive medium. Duh. And early games really relied on the player putting in some work. What do I mean by this? Imagination. That and reading the manual to actually know what the hell you're supposed to be doing. Imagination is a key component when it comes to interacting with these games. Do you think the castle is really the size of the hero here? No, of course not. It makes about as much sense as a person that doesn't talk or show any expressions or emotions, managing to get by in life as if he was. Now, since tech has improved, games have been able to ask less of the players in this regard, since they're able to make things more as is in-game. But even then, there are still some aspects that still require it, and others that simply are enhanced by it.
In my head, I was like, oh, you dumb bitch, I'm a fucking vampire. But like half the fun was in my head, you know?
Oh, well, that's like when I casted Mass Paralysis, and then sometimes you would cast at that wedding. Kyle, you know, we were talking about Assassin's Guild, Skyrim, you get assigned to the wedding. You stand in the middle, you do Mass Paralysis. Everyone at the wedding, except for the two back guards, is paralyzed, but it doesn't matter. And then you cast Firestorm, which is like the area of effect, like biggest fire one, and it kills everyone, including the two guards who try and run and get you if you cast it fast enough. And then you feel cool while you're leaving. And as I would leave, I would switch because I liked to feel like I was escaping the place. I would switch my left hand to regular paralyze and like my right hand to like firebolt. And then just like as you're walking out, you hear like someone's attacked the queen. Hurry! And like everyone's running and they're just telling you to stop, but you're just fucking paralyzed. And as you like slowly escape, it's fun. And you're right, it's all in your head.
Of course, one of these is when your character is talking. I would argue even where there are dialogue options, you still need to add your own voice to the character, like in Morrowind. I thought this video was about silent protagonists. Dialogue options means that they aren't silent. What do you mean? I don't think dialogue options disqualify characters from the label. A lot of early games had the yes-no option, which, yes, is the simplest way of presenting a dialogue option. But if we take a look at something like Morrowind, in some instances it isn't much more complex than that. Usually at the end of the quest, when you return to the quest giver, You get two options, one in the affirmative and one in the negative. But also I'll ask you this. In the clip I just showed and the clips that I'm about to show you, what is my character saying? Like verbatim. Just like older games, the game doesn't put words into your mouth, in most instances. It's a lot more complex than what we had previously in games, being able to bring up a lot of different topics and whatnot, even though you could do a similar thing in Final Fantasy 2 or whatever. But it still allows you to roleplay in an old school way. Do you want your character to say, "Yo bitch, I got your shit," when you talk to this lady? Or, "I have returned from my holy quest, my fair lady. The choices are yours and yours alone." The silent protagonist is especially useful in RPGs because of this. These games were designed to try and replicate the experience you would have when playing a tabletop RPG, in which you make your avatar however you want them to be. If the game gives them extensive dialogue, it makes it harder to roleplay as anything but a pre-written character. It makes the experience less personalized. Now this is the part where I have to mention Fallout. Fallout attempts to keep everything related to dialogue in-game, i.e. no imagination required. It works. I mean, it worked. Giving the player lots of options, I'm so sorry, allows them to roleplay and have it be reflected by NPCs in-game. You want your character to say, "Yo bitch, I got yo shit"? Well, if you have the option to do so, you can, and that character will actually react to you saying this. Not only that, but having low intelligence changes the dialogue options you have. There's a lot of things that can change what you can say, actually. To be honest, I haven't played enough of Fallout to do a deep dive into all the things that can get changed, but the system is extensive and it's great, and it's the reason why Fallout 4 sucks. Now, some people would go as far as to say that the way that Fallout does it should be the way that all games do it, and I disagree. A lot of people seem to think that RPGs is when the game is a dialogue simulator, which is not true. I stole that from Partition TV and I am unapologetic about it. The Elder Scrolls has never really been about the dialogue, it's always been about character building and the lore. It's aiming for different things than Fallout. It has different priorities. You can't just add things from games to other ones and expect the games to be better for it. Like, not every game needs to not have a difficulty slider, like Dark Souls, but Dark Souls doesn't need to have a difficulty slider, holy crap.
I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to say fuck you for your Pokemon opinion. There's no universal design philosophy. Pokemon wouldn't be made better with a robust conversation system and dating and fucking system.
So part of the silent protagonist is the blank expression. And since a lot of people misunderstand the silence as being literal, they also misunderstand the blank expression as also being literal, and we get takes like this.
Link himself is an absolute piece of wood, and this game really makes that apparent. He doesn't speak, react to much, or seem to have any emotional connection with anybody in this game. If Miyamoto wanted Link to represent the player in this game, well, I'm not seeing it. For myself anyway. I can't relate to this guy at all.
I'm so sorry, Johnny. I love your videos, man, but even back in 2013, this take bothered me. I didn't even like Zelda at the time. There is this concept in film theory called the Kulashoft Effect. The basic idea is you can manipulate the same piece of film in a way to get two very different results out of it.
We have a close-up. Let me show what he sees. Let's assume he saw a woman holding a baby in her arms. Now we cut back to his reaction to what he sees, and he smiles. Now what is he as a character? He's a kindly man. He's sympathetic. Now, let's take the middle piece of film away, the woman with the child, but leave his two pieces of film as they were. Now we'll put in a piece of film of a girl in a bikini. He looks, girl in a bikini, he smiles. What is he now? The dirty old man.
Objectively, the beginning and end pieces of film are the same, but the context around it is what gives it different meaning. A similar thing happens in gaming. You see, if a face is simple enough, it's really easy to project feelings onto it. Here's a clip of me accidentally using the wings item in the first Dragon Quest game. This face? Frustration and disbelief. And here's a clip of me saving the princess. This face? This is the face of a man that knows that sooner or later, he is gonna get some. If you look close enough, you can almost see a smirk and a wink. A lot of early games relied on the simple graphics to be able to broadly display things of this sort. The less specific you get, the easier it is for you to see what you want to see. It's like the clip from Family Guy where Lois is trying to be the mayor or whatever, and the guy she's running against doesn't really say anything specific, so everybody likes him, regardless of their political views, you know? It's like that, but with faces. There's a problem with this though. With graphics getting better, it is removing some of that wiggle room that we had in our minds for this kind of stuff. Where we once had an ambiguous expression, we now have a literal smile that just doesn't fit with the things that's happening around you, which is what happened in Sun and Moon. I think an easy way to fix this is to let players change the expression whenever they want to. Make the neutral one the default one, and let players change them during cutscenes and from the menu. Not all games with good graphics will have this problem. For example, the Elder Scrolls series doesn't really have this problem since it's first person, but if the silent protagonist is to survive with this original intention intact, some changes need to occur. My intention with this video wasn't to make the argument that the silent protagonist is better than voiced ones. It was simply to argue that both are valid ways of doing things. You can prefer a voiced one all you want, all I ask is that you understand the other side. I'm sure a lot of people, if presented with these arguments, will bring up examples of silent protagonists in a bad light to dismiss the concept as a whole, but they really shouldn't. On the other hand, I would feel like a George Lucas fanboy if I didn't bring up some problems I myself have with the system. That was a reference to my George Lucas Cope Spiral video, you should all go watch it. So, how can the no talking man be misused? Even though I can't think of a specific example of this, I'm sure you have all seen at least one. They want to have their cake and eat it too. A game with a very, very complex story, or just convoluted one, that tries at every moment to have the player be engaged with it at all times, and yet they'll still have a silent protagonist. If you're going for the quote movie plot, then the silent protagonist can simply be a crutch or a trope that is unnecessarily getting in the way of that. If your story would immensely benefit from having a voiced protagonist, and yet you have a silent one, well, that's stupid. This is as bad as a game having a very heavy emphasis on story just to have a heavy emphasis on story, without actually trying to tell something worth telling. It's the games need X mentality. Going back to God of War 2, you can't have that game's story with a Kratos that is a blank slate. Another one is when they are silent, like in-universe silent. Often an NPC will comment on the fact that the character in-game doesn't talk, saying something like, they don't talk much, or they are the silent type. Now this is usually supposed to be a wink and a nod to the player, poking fun at the concept as a whole, which is fine, but it becomes a problem when it goes beyond the fourth wall break and becomes literal to the world. Like instead of projecting your thoughts and emotions onto the character, you're just playing as someone that doesn't speak, nor shows any strong emotions one way or the other. One that is slightly relevant to this point is when there might be a point in the game where the character would naturally say something and yet they don't. I haven't played Dragon Quest XI, but I know that at some point you travel back in time and you encounter a character that you now know to be evil, and your character doesn't immediately tell everyone he knows this. Why? I have no idea. You should have no reason not to tell everyone the second you go back in time. But you simply can't. The game is just fine not letting you. It seems pretty dumb. So obviously the system isn't perfect, but it also isn't fundamentally flawed like a lot of people seem to think it is. It's the same way that Metal Gear Solid 4 isn't a better game than Mario 64 because it has a more complex story and Mario doesn't. These two games can exist and can be appreciated without being at odds. Some with silent and others with a voice protagonist. You can appreciate both. You can understand and simply prefer one over the other. Just don't assume that your preferences are how things should be. Because even if you like stories in games like the one in Metal Gear Solid 4, Mario 64 would not benefit from having one as convoluted as that one. This is the end of the video. If you enjoyed, please leave a comment letting me know what you enjoyed about it. Same thing goes for what you didn't enjoy about it, if that's anything. I also would appreciate you leaving a comment adding to the conversation. This video isn't a conversation, this video is a video, but conversation can still be had. It's a nice way of getting new perspectives. For example, the bit where I mentioned Elder Scrolls not having the blank face problem, well, I got that from
Astolfo SMG's
comment he left on my Pokemon video. It was something that I hadn't even thought of. Astolfo has some cool Fallout New Vegas videos. You should all go check him out. If you don't know who Adam Friended is, you might be a little confused, but I think you can still enjoy him regardless. Tell him I sent ya. Bye-bye.